We're on month 4 of our mystery, and the block this month is the Sawtooth Star. We're going to make 3 different ones, and you see the layout here for the Sawtooth Star. It is made up of 4 corner squares, 1 center square, and 4 flying geese units. You're wondering how you get geese out of this. When you look at this block, this triangle is supposed to be the goose flying. So if you put a bunch of them together, then you'd have geese flying in formation. In your kit are 3 different sets of fabric for the 3 different stars. If you don't like the combinations I picked, you can certainly mix them up. There are 3 strips that are 3 inches wide and 3 strips that are 4.5 inches wide. From those strips, you're going to cut out of the piece that's the background, so that's the widest one. Out of this one, you're going to need 4 1.5 inch squares for the background corners on the block. And then out of this one, the 3 inch strip, you are going to need 1 2.5 inch square that is the center of the star. Now the rest of it I'm going to demo using the Lazy Girls No Math Flying Geese ruler, and let me pull that and show it to you. This is the Flying Geese ruler. When you use this, you're making 4 flying geese units at once. So you'll be making all 4 that you need for the star block at one time. And when you look at this ruler, there are solid lines and there are dotted lines, and you're going to use both anytime you make flying geese with this ruler. The numbers are showing the finished size of the flying geese block. So B would make a 1 inch by 2 inch flying geese unit. And if you look on the dotted lines, B again is showing the 1 by 2 inch unit. Now the size that we need for this block is actually a finished 1 by 2. However, to guarantee more accuracy, we're going to make it slightly bigger and then trim it down. So I'm going to cut the C block, which is 1 1/4 by 2 1/2. So let me show you how this ruler works. Now when I go to cut my pieces to make them my flying geese units, I need 1 piece that is based on the solid lines, and I need 4 squares that are based on the dotted lines. Here's where the no math comes in. My strip of fabric, and this is going to be my goose. Remember this part in here, so my big square is my goose. And I need 1 square, a solid square, and I want to line it up on the lines for C. If your edges of your fabric aren't straight, then straighten it first. So I have here on the edge and here on the edge. And I can just cut that. Save the rest of your strip because that's where you're getting your corner units for your star. So I have that piece. And then from the piece that's going to be the background in this case, I'm going to need to cut 4 of the squares on the dotted sides. Now before I do that, I'm going to get a clean edge. If you were doing a whole bunch of these and you wanted to avoid having to do math, you would take the dotted line on C and line it up with the edge of the fabric. It's right there. Take another ruler and butt it up against the edge. Now I can take away my flying geese ruler and cut a strip. And that's my width, so you don't even have to read measurements when you're using this. Then I would take my dotted C lines right here and here. 1, 2, and keep going till you get 4. I've turned my 4 small squares that we cut with the No Math Flying Geese ruler so that I'm looking at the wrong side, and on all 4 of those I need to mark a diagonal line, just one direction on each square, corner to corner, and I have my sandpaper board out so that my fabric doesn't slip while I'm marking it. Now, what I'm going to do is take my big square that I cut with the ruler and line up 2 of the small squares on top of it with my marked lines going corner to corner. Then I will take it to the sewing machine and sew on a 1/4 of an inch away from the line on both sides. Okay, here you can see I've sewn my 1/4 inch seams on both sides. And now what I want to do is cut this unit in half right on my drawn line. Oh, before I do that, you'll notice my small squares overlap. It doesn't matter. I want the corners to match on this end and to just keep going across here. I'm going to cut it apart on the line. So I have these 2 units. At this point, I want to press the small triangles away from the larger one. And you can do this on the iron if you want. It stays a little bit better. Once you have it pressed, I probably will before I sew it. Then you're going to take another small square. It's going on the corner again, your 90-degree corner. And it's going to go right between these other 2 triangles. So you're not really worried about how it's lining up here. I'm lining up the edges of the fabric here and here. And I want to do that to both units. You take it to the sewing machine and again, a 1/4 of an inch away from the line on both sides. Okay, I have stitched on both sides of the drawn line and I just chain pieced. And now it's time to cut these in half again on the line. So here we go. And now I'm going to press this triangle out and I have Flying Geese units that are ready to be trimmed down to the proper size. Okay, because my finished size on this Flying Goose unit is 1 inch by 2 inch, that means my cut size needs to be 1.5 by 2.5. Just like last month when we were cutting square to square blocks, I want to make sure that I have my exact 1/4 inch here above the point. So I line my ruler up to make sure that I'm at the 1/4 inch mark. Cut that off. It needs to be 1.5 inches high. So now I can line my 1.5 inch mark up with my side that I just cut. And now I need it to be 2.5 inches wide, but rather than just cutting it, to say, okay, there's a clean cut, you would be chopping off 1 point. So half of 2.5 is 1.25. So I want to line up 1.25 mark, and with this ruler I can also put my 45-degree line here on the seam. You don't have to do that, but it helps. Cut that off. And then this time I want to line up. I'm lining up the cut edges here. I still have my 1.5, but what I'm watching especially is my 2.5 here. But if you keep your lines all lined up here, it helps keep your block straight. So you're going to need to cut down all of the Flying Geese units for all 3 squares to this size, 1.5 by 2.5. From the 3-inch strip in your kit, in addition to the pieces you cut for the Flying Geese, you need a 2.5-inch square. And I would really recommend that you cut that before you cut your pieces for your flying geese, just because that way you don't run the risk of cutting your strip down too narrow. So 2.5 inches. And then from the same piece of fabric, which is the 4-inch strip, that you cut your 1 square for the flying geese unit, you will need to cut 4 1.5-inch squares. And I did that one after I cut that big square. I haven't shown you this way of cutting before in the mystery. When I'm cutting a strip of the same length pieces, I like to cut my strip, and it is 1.5 inches. And I know that I need 4 of them, so 1.5 times 4 is 6 inches. So if I had my straight edge here, I have both edges clean here, then I go ahead and cut off on the 6-inch mark, and then I keep moving the ruler back. So my next cut would be the 4.5-inch mark, and the 3-inch mark, and the 1.5-inch mark. And the reason for doing this is because you keep your pieces straighter that way. If you cut off from the other end, you're here, and then move down and cut the next one, if you get a crooked cut, it just keeps getting more crooked. Whereas this way, you're always working off of your straight edge on this end. It's an option. Don't feel like you have to do it if it's too confusing. Now that I have all my units for my Sawtooth Star, I am going to lay out the star and sew it together in rows. I just noticed when I was laying this out that this background fabric in particular has a slight directional print to it. The little dots this way go a certain direction. So if you care, then pay attention to which way that's going. If you don't, it's not a big deal. That's what it would look like the other way. So I will go right sides together on these and sew my 1/4-inch seam. Now when I'm doing it on the flying geese units, I want to hit right here with my needle, and since we've trimmed this down with the 1/4-inch, it should come out pretty well, but just keep an eye on that when you're sewing it. I sew from this side so I can see when I come to that intersection, and if I need to slightly adjust, I do, so that I go right through that point. I have my block sewn together in rows, and I have finger pressed my seams. On my top and bottom block, I finger pressed out, and in, not block, rows. And in my center row, I finger press the seams in. There's less bulk this way. And remember, when we go to put our rows together, now my seams will nest here and here. And I'm again keeping an eye on my point right here when I'm sewing this together. So I will do that and bring it right back. So I've sewn my 3 rows together to finish my Sawtooth Star. I chose to press the seams for the rows in toward the center. There was less bulk than if I had gone this way and tried to move all those seams up into there. So they should measure 4.5 inches, and those 3 are it for this month.